We should be all right now, so
rocking.
Anyway, yeah. So I wanted to create, like I wanted to just get around the guys that I really enjoyed hanging out with, and also reach out to folks that I feel like in the SC community don't get enough credit, or they are making content about stuff that is really quite interesting, especially to me, but it's kind of lost on most of the community. Like for example, your stuff. I really enjoyed it, and like I guess you had, like, how long have you been making videos?
Oh, actively making videos probably just kind of like this last year and stuff. I mean, technically I have like a Battlefront video on there from like I have a Star Citizen video. It's actually my first video from like 2.0 era. So really actually making them, not since probably the last year. Technically I made one like probably 10 years ago or something, I think, for Star Citizen.
Dude, I remember making those early videos. So you played the game since it first came out, like from the very beginning then?
Unofficially, yes. I actually played on one of my friends. He had the game like pretty much on release, and I actually played it on his account for a while. And then a little later into the process, I think it's like 2016, I actually got into it myself finally.
Dude, I remember the old flight models, like the 2.x flight. Is that the, like, what's the first flight model you remember, like, really died in?
2.x was like, that was the golden era to me when it was Port Olisar, and pad revving was like things were so out of control back then. I remember that if you got a crime stat 5 and you got killed, you'd get banned from the game for 24 hours because they didn't have a prison system.
Yeah. Okay. I guess we could get started then. So I guess the stream will probably want to know, like, who you are, what group you're from, what's kind of your mission, like what are you trying to achieve when it comes to the content you're creating, or if there's any goal at all, and then what brought you to Star Citizen.
All right, wait, let's break it down for that. So what was the first thing, just like a bit about who I am and stuff, or?
Yeah, just anything you're willing to kind of, talk to the audience about, like who you are, what group you're, like, what are you all about? So if you're meeting someone for the first time, like, who is this Alkaline Hawk kind of guy?
Yeah, so for me, I've been doing Star Citizen since I guess officially 2016, but played it a little bit before that and everything. I really enjoy the oldest flight models that they had in the game and stuff, but I played the game on and off probably throughout the 3.x. I kind of got into a community near the end of the 3.x cycle. That was FFK, the League of the Faithful Knights. I like the mission they stand for and stuff. Very passionate about my faith. I'm a strong Christian, and they had some people in there who that's a lot of their leadership has a value. So that tied me into them, and then since then I really got, just within the last couple of years, I got really sweaty into PvP. But the problem is my computer, my rig was terrible. I was getting like sub 25 FPS and everything. and I want to play the game with my other friends, because I run another community called Adventure Club, which is a lot of guys who are kind of a network of guys who know each other IRL and stuff. And I want to play the game with them. They played Star Wars Squadrons. They loved it. And I've always been looking for that next Star Wars Squadrons. So yeah, I know you did a bit of Star Wars Squadrons back in the day,
bit,
right?
Yeah, I played a bit of Star Wars Squadrons. Yeah,
anyway, yeah, this is great.
Yeah, so that brings me back, man. I mean, I have so many questions too, even just to reminisce. Like, I remember when there was a time when Squadrons was first kind of hitting the mainstream. There was like 4 to 6 months where nobody really knew how to do the ping-ponging stuff. And for those people who probably don't know what that is, it's a way to break the flight model so that the X-Wings and all the fighters, they just didn't move the way they were supposed to.
There was no guides. There's no guides anywhere for it.
Yeah.
So you just didn't figure it out.
Yeah, it just, and the devs, I don't think, realized how good people would actually get. And they, I mean, everybody that played competitively, including myself, like, you just had to do it, because if you didn't do it, like, you just wouldn't be able to keep up. And it just kind of wrecked the experience for me at the very end. So after we did the big tournament with Eckart's Ladder and the big $20,000 tournament and all that stuff, like, we kind of just said, that's pretty much it. Like, that was kind of it, because we were kind of on life support for the last 4 months, because the devs were like, hey, we're not gonna keep working on this. EA's pulling us off of it. So like we're done, and that was kind of heartbreaking because to tell the community like right off the bat like you're already sunk, we're not going to support you, is really mentally and emotionally kind of like guaranteeing it to not succeed, you know. So I was really disappointed that EA basically just let Squadrons die on the vine, and it's a really great experience. It deserves so much better, you know. But yeah, maybe Squadrons 2 or something later on, because I know there's a Star Wars project in the making now. I think it's called Starfighter, so maybe that'll kind of,
yeah, I've heard about that,
you know, maybe that'll be the Top Gun of the Star Wars universe we're looking for, that may reinvigorate that kind of genre. So we'll see what happens. But yeah, so I want to talk to you about, because we could spend all night reminiscing about the good old days, right? Because we're both two bitter Star Citizen veterans, right? But I wanted to talk to you about the videos that you've been making, because I've been watching a couple of them now. I think they're really cool. I think they're really heavy on the technical analysis side, which, and this is why I appreciate them, because I'm at that point where I do look at stuff on a technical side and I understand everything you're saying. I'm like, yep, that tracks. Yep, that makes sense. And, you know, it makes me happy that there's other guys out there that are breaking things down technically. I do wonder, though, how the general public may or may not be able to digest that information, you know, because it is very technical. Do you feel like the content you're making is mostly just for funsies? Are you trying to reach out to the wider audience to kind of explain these concepts, or are you just doing this as like a passion project? What do you feel like your goal set is for the channel?
Yeah, so really the primary audience when I made these first initial videos is for pilots who want to get good at a particular way of flying inside of FFK. So they're kind of made as kind of companion pieces to me actually individually helping fighters in FFK learn how to fly a particular way. And then it's like, I made these, and only so many people in FFK really are receptive to them and stuff. It's a very niche style of fighting in a more competitive aspect. So a lot of these I then just is like, okay, I'll blur all the information about like who I'm fighting and stuff to try to avoid any drama, and then I'll just put it out to the masses, and hopefully if someone benefits from them, that's awesome. And it's not too much additional effort on my part, so.
Because I watched the one you did recently about the Valkyrie, and you were putting in the VTOL, and it reminded me of the old model too.
Asgard,
we were talking
Asgard,
about.
Yeah,
sorry, the Asgard. Yes, sorry. You know, and creating those extensions with VTOL, because you get a little extra G's. You're able to kind of strafe hard up and stuff. Now that you understand master modes a lot more, do you feel like, where do you feel the game currently sits with the flight model, with the thruster model, and then where would you kind of like to see it go, if you want to see it go anywhere?
So for me, I think there's a lot for me that I think is still underexplored in the current flight model. And what I would like to see is more people explore things in the flight model from more perspectives. For instance, like the Santok AI, I've tried to make an analysis video on the Santok AI like 3 times, and my like recording keeps on like just dismantling itself. Like it's cursed. Santok AI is cursed. If you turn on its VTOLs on and off and the vehicles is turned on, your strafes become asymmetrical and some of them become reduced by 40%. It's a wacky bug. Its gimbals also don't work unless you toggle its VTOLs on and off. So you have to like turn it off to toggle them on and off. And if you do that, you actually can get the gimbals to work, and you get all these really powerful strafes. And you've been able to do this since, from what I can track, all the way since the release of 4.0. And I was able to actually get it to work at right the very end before this most recent patch that made the Santok AI really strong. And now I'm hearing people saying that the Santok AI is like really OP and stuff since this latest patch. But I actually feel like the Santok AI might have actually been even stronger than a lot of people like let it out to be before this recent buff and stuff. So, which for me, I'm like, if the Santok AI could have been like that just the last patch, but it could have been that since 4.0, like months upon months ago. I feel like there's just this almost like level of under exploration in the current flight models. So
I think there is a culture of that. I think there is this almost like a dogma, and I'll kind of talk to my friends about this too, and for me it was very surprising. I've been doing nose-to-nose like trade fights and gladiuses since like 2016. It's been almost 10 years of doing the same thing in every different flight model. And so when Master Modes came out and things changed a little bit and interceptors became like a much more viable strategy, I guess you could say. For me, I thought that was super interesting, because for the longest time I've been doing nose-to-nose trades, and that was kind of the dogma. It's like, that's how you fight, that's the most effective way, and there's lots of things to point towards as to like, this is the most effective way to play. But I think the interceptors, over the months that I was flying them, were proven to be, I think, a lot more effective in team fights at the expense of being great duelists. And this kind of culture rejected it so viciously, and I got just hounded for probably the better part of 8 months, because I wasn't following along with this kind of standard way of the, you know, of, I guess you could say, a portion of the community's expectation as to how fights should look and feel. Whereas I was kind of coming at it from the lens of a scientist, almost like, what is actually working? Why is it working? Why is it this? And, you know, I always tell my guys, like, I consider myself a student of war with Star Citizen. Like, I'm always learning different things. And this is what I like about your channel, is because you, I think, kind of embody that idea too. It's like, well, how can we get this to work? Like, how can I get the Guardian to work? You know, is it really as bad as people think it is? Is there not a way to get it to function effectively? And I think we've had some really cool engagements in the past. Yeah, recently.
And this is a huge testament to you and stuff, because like, for me, my way of flying is very, very programmatic. You can go to like one of my videos that has the Corsair stuff that and I literally have a screenshot of it's a literal if-then program, like programmatic statement of how I fly the ship. So my intuition is if my Guardian was able to be beaten, it should be able to be beaten like thoroughly, because I don't play super dynamically. Like, I have a system that dynamically interacts with others, but someone should be able to create like a counter program that can systematically dismantle it and stuff. And really, me fighting you was the first time I saw that way of flying actually expressed. So like, when you said, hey, you need to fight under 300 meters, normally people are like, I always just like, I can't get off the nose of the Guardian, I can't get off the nose of the Guardian, I can't get behind it or something like that, or they can't stay behind it. But when you pointed out, it's like, you just need to get within 300 meters, because at that point you're actually outrating my gimbals. A lot of people don't realize gimbals have really slow turn rate, and you're constantly ping-ponging between the other extremities of my gimbal rates, even in close range, which really mitigates my effectiveness. Yes. And then pushing back out. And having someone finally systematically do that, it felt like this just madness has finally gone away, because I was like, thousands of fights, months on doing this, and even in previous flight models doing it with different ships like the F-8C and stuff, I was like, there has to be a way to like ace through this program, like have the counter script that just rewrites everything to zeros. And you were the first fight that I've had where I didn't really have any like significant cope or something that happened during the fight with back-to-back blue ships, which, to bracket my own bias, again, I'm very pro like heavy fighter master modes, so it's really anyone who would have done this, I would have pointed out like, this is insane, because this hasn't happened like ever for me in recent memory. So
okay, so I want to get into this because I'm excited to talk to you about this stuff. Right, so people like to put me in a box, I think, when it comes to this stuff. I am not a master modes hater. I think sometimes I don't do myself any credit, because people ask me on stream all the time, do you like master modes? And I go, I hate it, it's terrible. Right? Yeah. I get why people go like, oh, I hate master modes. So I don't particularly hate the idea of master modes. I'm actually very pro some of the ideas. I'm not a huge fan of the thruster model. I think the thruster model in the previous build, like with tricording, I think allowed us to gain different angles that I think felt a little nicer. There's something kind of jarring where if you're going straight towards the target and then you add lateral strafes in, to lose forward momentum so that you can gain lateral movement feels really like, it just doesn't feel good. You know, you're in space, all of a sudden you start to slow down because you want to move left and right. To me, it just does not feel natural. It's very, very difficult for me to get on board with that and be like, this is a better way than the old way. And I think largely, I could be wrong here, I think largely is because CIG wanted to make an experience that was more intuitive to the layman. So to the layman, you know, point nose towards target, push, like I should be able to get there faster than if I have to come on a, like an angle and twist myself a little bit. You're like, wow, that doesn't make any sense, right? But it's physics, like, you know, thruster positions plus, you know, angular movement equals like a vector that's going to be faster with multiple pushes on different angles instead of one hard push on a very specific angle. So it's just, you know, to me, I think at first I was a little more on board with the idea of master modes, and as I started playing it more and more and more, I'm like, yeah, it's just like tricording just was better. It just was better. It solved more issues than it created. And to me, I'm always on the side of create an experience that people can get into and learn. Don't create an experience that learns for you. You know, don't dumb it down. Like, allow it to be deep, allow it to be engaging, allow it to be unique, because people will grow into it, people will learn it, people will get into it, you know, but don't sacrifice the depth. Yeah, it's a long way.
I can see that with like it, because 2.0, the complaint in the game is the game's too arcadey. 3.0, a lot of people are the game doesn't seem to be like you're not able to get into it enough and stuff. And for me, like a lot of the like competitive community I was a part of was like Smash Bros community and stuff for a while. And you look at Super Smash Bros Melee, and it never had updates, so the community was just stuck to figure out that current model and then fully explore it to like the extent of it is. And there's still theories that go on. Like there's people who like there's this guy who wrote like an entire thesis on how Donkey Kong mathematically should be the best character in Super Smash Bros. Melee, and I think it's compelling. So, but so to me, for some instances, it may not necessarily be that it's like, hey, this model's better than this model and this model. I mean, part of it is I think the community, if the community could sit longer with some of the models, I think we might be able to find and explore certain things and stuff. The other thing is I do feel like this Master Modes iteration is less arcadey than the 2.0 version. I still hate people nav moding away. There's a reason I run the QI is that way people can't nav mode. I basically turned it into 2.0 so I can go back for myself. And then, so I kind of hate Master Modes in my own way. But hopefully this is for me like kind of an in-between between 2.0 and 3.0, and I do think there's a little bit of a push, and I think there are changes coming out. I think I read about one person who is talking with one of the devs that they are trying to fix an issue right now where like if you put in a lateral strafe while trying to push someone, like it does feel terrible, like because there's two ways I fight people. I was talking to GCat earlier because I had one fight where I lost to him pretty narrowly, and I had the second fight and I was able to beat him pretty well. In the first fight, I was trying to like do these pushes where I'm using lateral inputs to try to be evasive while I'm trying to close in on him and stuff. Second match, I let go of all my inputs. I just hold the W and boost key to just chase him down. That way I can actually merge on him. So there is this issue where it's like, if you want to close, there's really, it's a straight line. There's not a lot of extra skill that goes into closing someone. So
let's ask you this then. What do you feel like, because you said you were a fan of Master Modes and stuff, right? So I want to understand why you feel like, what about Master Modes do you feel like is a superior, like what is being done better with what we have now than the previous iteration of the build? What do you feel like is that kind of point?
If I gave someone the game who's just a random one of my friends who plays, I don't know, Hero Shooter or another game or something, and I want to play a game as a community, because the community I run is a variety gaming community and stuff, I would like a game that gets someone into it and makes them feel like they can they can meaningfully contribute to a team fight within probably like less than a half dozen hours of playing the game. And I think that Master Modes gets you to that at least minimal level. Like I can train someone up to like if people actually, I went through with a friend who was terrible, one of the worst pilots ever. He's like a clip of it, and I've given it worst pilot ever. I went through just 2 nights with him, really sweaty nights, and all of a sudden like he's like red shipping me with the way I fly and everything. So I've done that with probably 2 to 3 different guys and stuff. And I really like that Master Modes can allow me to do that, to like grow a community around Star Citizen a bit more feasibly. So,
and that was impossible in the previous model because of what you think?
I couldn't figure it out myself intuitively without other people. So this one, if I knew that the Master Modes was 2.0, I probably could have flipped this script a lot faster. FFK made me figure it out so much faster, gave me amazing training partners, and has made me able to like counter a lot of the potential counter flight styles to this style. But if I was alone with 3.x, which I was, and I did do a lot of solo play because the majority of 3.x cycle I wasn't in FFK, I never figured out how to do it just intuitively. So
yeah, I wonder if you had access to the community that you do now in the previous model, I wonder if maybe you would have picked it up much faster, you know?
I think so, but I would like it to be that the game could be picked up by someone without them having to have that, because I just know so many people who do video games that they're people say they're introverts. There's other people who are just to another level of extent of introverts, and they need to figure out how to figure out the game just a little bit intuitively on themselves and feel like they can contribute before they really buy in to the community. I think even at a larger scale. So
that's a good
point. At least
point.
practically, that's been me. But
so that's a good point, and I wonder to myself that, see, here's what I come from. I feel like Star Citizen right now is still in the research and development phase, and what that means is, if we were to have a more how do I say it? If it were to have a deeper, higher speed flight model that is a little more difficult to pick up, as long as it, in my opinion, achieves the goal of being this like really high depth, intuitive, high fidelity kind of experience, then we get that solidified, and then we bring it to the masses by creating, really strong tutorial systems, all that stuff, because I feel like not everyone is going to go to YouTube and search, how to get good. It's
100%, and that's a lot of where I'm like, we just need to sit with one of them, sit with a model for so long, which I think we're making headways towards. If this model was completely different than 2.0 or 3.0, to another end of the extremity, but it is in the middle, I feel like we'd be losing ground towards that. But since we're kind of in that middle ground, I think we're slowly solidifying and exploring all that stuff out and building it out. That way we can get towards that. So, but I am if 3.x was right here, there was something beautiful about 3.x and being how it felt super physically based, and it felt like you're flying in the expanse at these kilometers a second and shooting people, and the level of skill that you'd see expressed was really insane. And if there was an ability for a tutorial to be given in the game that taught someone who had no experience of the game to do it within 6 hours, I'd be all here for it. So, but
yeah, I guess at this point we'll never know, right? I'm just glad to have experienced that. It was the best. It was the greatest flight combat experience game I've ever played by orders of magnitude, and I think that's why it was very painful.
It was truly unique. There's nothing like it. So
there's really nothing like it, and it is possible. I think what I miss the most about that old system is the control of energy, the mastering of momentum. It's being able to get in on a target, stay on top of them at speed, engage them while you're creating separations, because you just have so much more room to move. A lot of people,
that's what's missing to me when I find a lot of people who are great at the game. They have great aim, they have a decent position and everything. That's the missing piece that a lot of people who fight me when I'm playing in heavy fighters are missing, that prevents them, I think, from getting those decisive wins. That you playing 3.x and being a master of 3.x, of being able to just so utterly control that distance is what's been able to counter. Because when you're flying in an arrow, if you make 0.2 seconds worth of error, I can flatten that thing out. You just for 0.2 seconds sit in that 300 to 600 meter range for me. You just make a little tiniest of mistakes, you're done for. And your, I think, control that you demonstrated in 3.x that maybe doesn't always express itself as heavily or significantly as factors like aim and do in light fighter v light fighter battles, is it's what allows you to look like you're playing a Elden Ring speed runner when you're fighting me when I'm in a heavy fighter. So I remember you messaged I watched back on the stream after Funksy told me, he was like, hi, this guy, he was screaming and stuff. I'm and you're the Gladius can this is why the Gladius beats the Guardian. From my perspective, I'm thinking of this of the meme. I don't know if you know JonTron and Flex Tape and Black Seal, but he has a scene during it where the guy who's the infomercial guy is carrying this giant weight with this duct tape, flex tape, and he's like, the tape's not strong, Phil, you're strong. So when you beat the Guardian, I'm like, it's not the Guardian, you're just the only guy who's ever done it with me. And then you go on and do it with the arrow also, so it's just nuts. But
yeah, I think but that's the thing, that is the legacy of the old model, where like distance control is a completely, like, most of a fight I think came down to like really strong throttle and distance control, and then less about just like pixel popping, whereas Master Modes is all about pixel popping and much less about throttle control, about actually, like, flight is so much about managing your energy. You know, if you're in an airplane, you're diving, you're holding energy in turns and that kind of stuff, and I feel like that's what got gutted at the expense of creating this product that was, you know, more consumable by the masses that are more casual. And I feel like what we gave up because of that gave us a significantly inferior product. You know, it's just, there are merits to Master Modes that I think are really good, and I think if they brought back, you know, I think I've been saying this for a while, like I think the 500 to 600 meter zone is where the game shines. It's fast enough to create control, and it's slow enough that it doesn't go into the stratosphere and you lose everything you try to shoot, you know? I think that's where the game feels the best, around that zone. Do you agree?
Yeah, and I mean, I like to play heavy fighters in also Star Wars Squadrons. I was a Y-wing and a B-wing guy who ran reinforced hull in those games, so I'm this slow ship. I wasn't big in the competitive scene, but I did fight like competitive teams every now and then. We had like that 98% win rate in quick play, and it'd be those 1% of the times we'd go against a competitive team. It'd be like a 50-50 on if we actually beat them or not. So, and there is this aspect where it's like when I think about those larger ships and stuff in Squadrons, I loved how they did backwards drift, where like you had to use boost to sustain the backwards G's and everything with those. But there's something about Squadrons where it felt like whenever you're fighting, it always was that 300 to 600 meter sort of zone, and that made it really cinematic. And it is something I would like with those sort of things in this game and stuff. I honestly like the similar top speeds regardless of boost. That way people aren't just like kiting away 24/7 and everything. But if it was more like Squadrons, I'd be here for it. So
yeah, I think, you know, I've been saying this to other developers, including Yogi himself. I tell him all the time. I say, like, look, dude, I think what we're missing is we're missing a proper gunnery system. You know, we have this lag lead pip system with ESP and all this other stuff, and that's great. You know, it is a workable system. It works-ish. It's not terrible. It could be a lot better, but it's not terrible. Weapons auto-converge and do all these things, and it's like, cool, you know what I mean? But Star Wars Squadrons had something really cool where it had a gun sight, like a typical World War II dogfighter. You didn't have a lag or a lead pip. You had high velocity projectiles, and you had a bore sight. You basically said, gun, go shoot this way, and then you had to manually lead the target with your eyeballs. Like, you literally had to watch your tracers and be like, okay, I need to be a little bit to the right, and then bang, you hit them, you know? So the deflection angles were very tight, so you didn't need to lead them 2-3 ship lengths. You just need to lead them like maybe a quarter of a ship length at a really tight turn, you know? And if he was at any point neutral in the fight, you would just be, you know, put gun sight on pip and pull the trigger. And I think that felt really, really good, because naturally, you might notice this too, if you were to take the pip system away, you would naturally be shooting at closer ranges, because in order for you to actually get a visual, it's usually within the 300 to 400 mark to actually see the ship properly, to see the lead angle. Anything past 500 meters, I think you're mostly just trusting the aim system itself, and less about your actual eyes on the target. And I think that is probably where we could make the biggest strides in the feeling of the Master Modes product, is just a new gunnery system. I've been saying this for a long time. Like, I think pip systems are a bad idea, but it's hard because, like, when you have something like a pip system, you know, you can accurately shoot people from essentially 2,500 meters away, which is pretty much beyond visual range for most people. So if you got BVR gunnery now, you take that away, people are going to be upset. They're going to be like, well, I used to be able to hit stuff at 2,500 meters, now I can barely hit them at 300. And I've noticed that, you know, like, if you give something to somebody, they're much more responsive. But if you take something away, like you took all their speeds away, you did all this, like, people get really frustrated and upset about it. Do you feel like that was the case?
Two sides thinking about it this way is, if you did do that, I would realistically see them probably removing like the extent that they have manual gimbal on turrets and pilots, which, again, someone take it away saying it's a decade-old feature. I'll be a little bummed. Other people will probably be pretty bummed. But for me, like, if they were able to make this game so you could play it on a gamepad and make it feel like you're playing Star Wars Squadrons on a gamepad, which seems very difficult with the number of keybinds that we have, I would love it. I don't want to force people to. Whenever I play the game, if I have to play on mouse and keyboard and I'm not playing manual gimbal, the game feels bad to like fly to me. Like it feels it doesn't feel unintuitive. It feels unimmersive to me when I have to like drag my nose of my ship with my uncentered mouse. But when I do like manual gimbal, I'm like, this makes sense. I'm a sci-fi ship. I have turrets and stuff. I'm like the Slave One or Millennium Falcon. I can like kind of slave these and shoot people in front of me and stuff. I'm like, this makes sense, and it feels good. And my ship kind of auto flies itself into where the gimbal is and everything. So I kind of have like these two kind of extreme perspectives. I want the game to feel good on mouse and keyboard because that's like the most accessible thing that you do when you play PC games. Is you have a mouse and keyboard game. In order to play a game on PC, you have to have those two things. So I am very pro make the game accessible on that extent. Other side of the thing is if they somehow made the game way simpler and stuff, they probably have to remove a whole bunch of features, which would probably not be like very popular. But if they made the game really fun on gamepad, somehow, I love the game being fun on gamepad, and I did like those things that they had on Star Wars Squadrons. If they full commit to one of those, I like those. If they did something in the middle that has a whole bunch of bad parts from each of those, I could see that being a problem. So
yeah, it's tricky because Squadrons was much more like, it's weird. Squadrons was a lot more flight centric. There was a power management system, but it didn't require you to really like be fiddling around with a lot of stuff.
I mean, I was playing DDR like on my controller to do some. In the competitive scene, they had like all the power shunting and everything.
Oh, I remember.
Yeah, it was like playing Dance Dance Revolution with your boost and your power management, and I loved it. So I was actually really bummed when they removed the power triangle management and they went to the new pin system because I kind of like that. But I get that is one of those things. I think it makes the game more accessible for a lot of fighters where you just have a static power thing that they maybe change in the future of multi-crew. But
yeah, from the rumors I've been able to hear, it sounds like they might be going to a more Star Wars Squadrons power system where it is a little bit more in tune with, you know, shunting power into different aspects like engines, weapons, or shields, and then just mastering the timing as to when and where to shunt those power settings, you know, and what kind of advantages you get for it. I do miss the power triangle too, but the power triangle was basically a glorified reload mechanic. You know, you stayed in engines until you needed to get your guns back, and you just flipped it back into guns, and then switched it back into engines, and off you go.
I'm just biased because it made manual gimbals, which worked really well, kind of really strong. Because even though they had a reduction in rate of fire back then, the reduction in rate of fire was overstated if you took in the reload time, because rate of fire only reduces your rate of fire while you're firing. It doesn't reduce your recharge rate. So yeah. I could fly really evasive and stay in shields the whole time, and it was not the nicest because you could wiggle to the extent that would hurt your own aim, but then sort of fix it with the gimbal. So
yeah,
during 323 master modes, P6 was the one guy who I had one night where I fought him probably like 20 times. I got him once, and that was it.
Yeah, he's strong, man. He's always been really strong, and it's really nice to see. It's tricky. I mean, there's a lot of different factors that go into why things are the way they are and how good things are. But I think for the most part, where do you currently see? Because recently I was a little bit, how do I say it this way? Not upset, but I kind of get to the point where I get a little. It's not depressed. It's like I feel like I'm a flight instructor, and one of my students is making the exact same mistake every time, and they always come to me and say like, oh, I think I fixed it, and they're just totally off base. I'm just like, just please listen. You need to do this to fix that. And then they come back and they do something completely different, and there's no listening, you know what I mean? And CIG, you know, they put out this live stream, and they're like, they bring these guys on, they're doing the flight model stuff, Yogi and the other gentleman, and they say point blank in front of everybody, we like the position the heavy fighters is in, you know, we think they're doing great. And I'm just like, do you feel like that's a true statement? Do you feel like heavy fighters are in a great place that they claim they're in? Where do you kind of see them? So
if we're outside of me, do you know anyone else who like seriously plays heavy fighters in 421?
You're the only one, buddy.
So I probably have a very different perspective than a lot of people, and I have this tinfoil hat thing that I don't know how Yogi reads my minds on these things, but I keep shifting metas, and whatever I shift metas to, that like really a lot of people aren't doing, it gets nerfed. Like I'm playing Cuddy
That's
Blue,
what happened to me with the Buccaneer, the M50.
Yeah.
Like, I get the same feeling. It's weird because I know exactly where you're coming from because I do a lot of experimenting too, and I'm just like, again, I come at it from the speed and energy perspective, and I think you come at it from the tank and control like perspective.
Yeah,
and
I'm coming from the Y-wing and the TIE bomber. You're coming at it from the TIE fighter and TIE interceptor. If you're running the TIE fighter, not with reinforced hull. So
yeah, I think we both are like convinced. Yes, like this is a better way to play than just running around in a nose trading Gladius.
Yeah.
You know. Okay. So yeah. So finish your thought on heavy fighters.
So heavy fighters. So I used to run the Cuddy Blue and the Cuddy Steel as pseudo heavy fighters, and
I missed those.
No one in the game at the time was saying that those things are OP and beating Gladiuses in the game. No person said that. I was having success beating people with it with a whole bunch of stuff, and then Yogi's like, these ships have way too much HP. In back of my head, I'm like, he's totally right. He's totally right. I'm thinking that people should never be able to take out. No one in the community wanted that change, probably, or cared about it. I got nerfed by it. Same thing, I do the Corsair for a while. This one was a little bit more of a community. I started playing the Corsair in Squadron battles. I'm top fragging Squadron battle after Squadron battle, and then they nerf they nerf the Corsair. They get rid of the 2 guns on the bottom and everything, and they slave it, and then they keep on throwing nerfs at it. And then all of a sudden, all the guys who like grind the leaderboards for the Star Citizen, they're all starting to run Corsairs and stuff also. So it gets nerfed, but it's still crazy strong. It is Squadron battle last night. It was nuts. So same thing for like heavy fighters for me is like, I'm doing the Guardian and those sort of things. I feel like it's really strong if you explore it to the farthest extent of it. Again, you're the only person who I fought who has expressed a systematic way in which it's not just backstrafing, but it's almost more like deep sea fishing, where it's like you kind of let it go, you let it wear out, and then you really push in and you reel in at the right time, and you're able to really accelerate that battle and fight it. So for me, I as someone who doesn't have all this telemetry and data that has all the win rates and everything and see how much time players have actually set in an actual patch, I don't necessarily feel like I want to say that heavy fighters aren't in a good place, because to say that would mean that I think I have enough experience with them to make that justification, when in reality I don't think the community has enough exploration to really say that. So, and I have this precedent of Yogi countering every meta that probably is a little bit busted over and over again, so I have a degree of trust in this sort of mysterious meta changes that they make that others may not, because it feels like they haven't been vendetta against me. So, but
okay, so I want to unpack that because I got some points here I want to bring up. So
apologies.
So you are correct in that when you're playing something unique, I guess the best way I can say it, you know, there's a player that likes Limbo. You probably know who I'm talking about.
Oh, yeah.
Limbo, which I'm sure I'm going to get him on the podcast at some point because I think he's quite interesting. He flies the Glaive like almost exclusively, and has been flying it for a long time, and he gets some really interesting results. Like, yeah, you can take fights off a Gladius that is very experienced. Like, you know, you can kill them. It's possible.
Yeah.
I think on average, obviously, I think that's mostly due to 2 things though. One, being a novelty ship and fighting in a different style and way.
In high alpha.
Most people will look at that like a deer in headlights because they have absolutely no idea what they're going to be dealing with, and they've done 1,000 fights and they've all been identical, and then all of a sudden there's another fight and it's totally different, and it takes them a while. Like, they're going to die a bunch before they realize, like, okay, wait, I can't attack this problem the same way. I have a different experience than that because I have had 100,000 fights in different kinds of ships across the board, and so I always approach a fight as I have all these tools in my toolbox. This is the problem I have to solve. What tools do I need to bring to the job to get that problem to be solved, right? Your range control, your all that stuff is all tools in your box. I think getting the kills off certain guys and experienced guys may give you a false perception of the true like nature of where the ship is sitting in the, I guess you could say, the overall meta. And especially when you go into the PU, I have on many occasions brought out like Anvil Pisces, and I mean, I've shot guys down in cutters and all these ridiculous ships that should have no business killing stuff. And in the previous model, I used to shoot Gladiuses down in the Prospect.
Yeah.
Like, you can kill people in all kinds of stuff, right? But I always look at it from this perspective of like a research development guy. Like I'm on the Honda team, F1. It's like, okay, where is the maximum limit for the car? Who cares about the driver right now? We're going to put the best driver in the world in it at some point. Where's the min-max of this car? And I think that heavy fighters are just not even operating in the same field, you know? And I've been arguing this for a long time because the Cutlass also falls into this category.
Yeah, so from my perspective, all the arguments you're bringing up is like it's you have all these issues of how do you triangulate the truth of the matter. If you're looking at some sort of qualitative research, or if you're trying someone on a trial, you have to triangulate something, whether it's from different data sources over a long period of time, through different methods. In a lot of these ships, it's like it's only one guy flying that ship, or it's only that one guy flying that ship, but he only does it for a month, or you don't have different types of people flying that ship. And basically, from that perspective, the issue for me comes is it's very difficult to say if the ship is actually like overpowered and busted,
all right,
and if so, to what extent, or to say that it's underpowered and busted and to what extent. And that's part of, again, kind of my passion of like trying to get more people to actually try these things and try them seriously over a long period of time. I think for me, I've been able to do so for heavy fighters because I've done it for like the last year. In the free flight community is a relatively small community, so people who want to fight me can do it over and over again. So I get repetition of like hundreds of fights with the same guys. So if they were able to develop counterplay, they have the opportunity to. So you're wild because you didn't have 100 fights. You had a one fight and you just did it first try. But again, free flight community is small.
See, but that's the thing is, it was the first fight with that ship, but not the first fight solving that problem. And that's the difference, right? Most guys don't solve for these different problems. They solve for the nose trade, just get in there, pixel pop, and get them. And it's all the same thing.
Again, it's not most people, though. To specify, it's like the triangulation again. If I had what you've done to me from multiple sources, I would be like, yeah, the heavy fighter is like hard capped, and once you reach the light fighter to a certain meta extent, you beat it out. And my hypothesis is probably that is the case. But it's one of those things I don't want to double down on until I see a few other people outside of you do it, and also until I see at least one or two other people adopt Guardian outside of myself, because there may be a way to develop a counter strategy to it. And maybe it is that I just need to lay my head on my W key harder and stop doing other stuff. That way I can close faster.
So think about, okay, so I want you to do a thought experiment with me here, right? Because I agree. I think that the chasing for data will always be a constant forever thing. There's so many factors that come into it. You know, you might get a certain result, and then you fight a whole new generation of pilots, and it's it's not what I thought.
Would argue against that a little bit. There is that for a lot of times for like quantitative research and stuff, and like keep on power scaling things. But when it comes to like qualitative research, it's like we're just looking for like the thematic repetition across like different aspects of triangulation. So it's, have we seen this thing happen over time? Have we seen it from different sources? And have we seen it with different methods, maybe different ships? I'm like, if all those things repeat themselves as like a, hey, yeah, these things are working, then I think you can say that thing is working. Now, to what extent it works, which is a quantitative issue, I think you can work on that for an eternity. But to at least explore if it is an issue, I think we can, I think that can actually be like pragmatically converged on if just more people put effort into it. So
yeah, so using that same logic, I feel like you are the anomaly. You are the only person who's made heavy fighters semi-viable. Not from my perspective, but I can see it from your perspective as to like, well, I'm not seeing A1 every day. I'm seeing one A1, right? And I'm seeing one Alkaline Hawk. You know, and all these other top players, they're falling into these categories where it's like you're getting wins off them, and on my side, I'm not seeing guys bring in, like, you're the only one who flies. Like, I don't see.
Yeah, you don't have other guys to fight
B6, Yi or B6 Jordan guys bring in, or I Road Rage guys. Like, they're not bringing Guardians, right? Like they're bringing Gladius.
In academia, this is like one of the most common issue that a lot of people like try to solve in like their academic like career ladder is people create great theories and great hypotheses, but there's not enough case studies to corroborate them. So you then have people with opposing theories, but they really don't go anywhere because there just simply isn't case studies to analyze to go through them. So reading my passion for creating these long form contents recently as to kind of make those case studies that other people can then hopefully synthesize and make like more accessible to people, or actually find a theme, corroborate it with their own stuff, to actually try to find these principles are really good. Like I look at some of your content, I look at JW's content, and you guys are able to make these like capstone pages on like how to do X maneuvers the most optimal way possible and stuff. But like for heavy fighters, we don't have 20 years of or 10 years of people doing heavy fighters to be able to converge on that for a lot of those things. There's carryover, but particularly looking at class v class ships and stuff, there's just not enough case studies. So okay,
so let's do this thought experiment I was talking about, right? So
yeah, go for it.
So, and I'm not sure how to identify what type of study this is, but so given the old model and the new model, there are two constants in both the old and the new master modes. And tell me if you agree with this. Acceleration equals control, correct?
Acceleration equals control. I think I can go with that for now. So.
And what that means for me is the higher your acceleration, the more ability you have to negotiate, to dictate at what point of the fight happens at what time.
Yes.
So for example,
yes.
Our fight with the Guardian, if this was a conversation, my Gladius is saying, okay, I want this now. And your Guardian's constantly giving that to my Gladius because I'm the one in control of the distance. You had no
yes.
choice but to hold the distance that I set, right? And because of that, I was able to force my advantage onto you, which eventually ends up getting the kill. So to me, control and acceleration in a 6 degrees of freedom game is probably one of the most, like, turn rate aside, all that stuff, turn rate doesn't really matter that much. In my opinion, it's much more based on the acceleration and control.
I couldn't agree more on that last part, like, ever. Like, acceleration for me matters oftentimes much more than turn rate, especially because I play gimbals, which people have different takes on where gimbals, how they should be and all that sort of stuff. But for me, it makes oftentimes turn rate matter even less at the end of the day. But one of the interesting things is, now that you bring that up, most heavy fighters, I agree with you. Like if I play an F8C or an MX, I feel like the light fighter should just be able to beat me, and based on that logic, it checks out. I can pull out tricks and stuff that I can use to make people misread me. Like I'm playing Super Smash Bros. Or something. I'm playing Super Smash Bros. I'm playing Bowser, or I'm playing Ganondorf, a really good Fox player who's really light and nimble on their feet. They should just be able to beat me, but I can sometimes occasionally make reads to get sort of lucky kills. When I look at the Guardian, though, the Guardian is, again, it's more of like a Donkey Kong if you play Super Smash Bros. He's like really fast and he's big, because if you actually look at the strafes on like SP Viewer here, it has nearly double the down strafe of a Gladius. And if you actually use hold on. Okay, so I'm going to use the Donkey Kong reference here, right? Yeah, go for it.
So if, and let's just use the logic here.
Yep.
If you were to play Super Smash Brothers, right? And Donkey Kong's, like, so Donkey Kong's movement speed, how close is it to the movement speed of all the other characters in the cast? Would you say it's within 5%, 10%, 20%? What's the movement speed there?
Oh, I'm not certain. So
it's pretty close though. As far as I understand, I think it's almost identical. All the the Super Smash Bros. Characters are relatively like close together in speed. Even like Fox, who's like the fastest character, is still movement speed pretty much the same with a lot of the other ones. Like Donkey Kong is slightly slower, right? So the acceleration, the ability to control the fight, Donkey Kong can force Fox to fight, and Fox can force Donkey Kong to fight. But in Star Citizen, Fox can force Donkey Kong to fight at range, and Donkey Kong can never get close. So
this is a rabbit hole of Super Smash Bros. Donkey Kong. I don't know if people will get, but if you look at it, one of the big things is how fast. It's really usually it's more about like it is the acceleration idea. Is like how fast do your frames come out, and how fast are you able to get out of your frames. Like how long are you locked into them. And Donkey Kong is actually able to get in and out of those fairly quickly, though he has the larger hitbox and everything. It's like people like Bowser and Ganondorf that they suffer from a lot of those areas and stuff.
Correct.
So if I have like the MX and the F8C. They don't have that ability, but the Guardian actually has insane like average strafes across the board compared to
what is it, like 14 lateral all around?
So it's a little bit it actually changes you if you put landing gears down or up, which is wild. So
yeah, that's
so a lot of people don't know this. If you put the landing gears down, it actually goes into like a VTOL mode, and it hurts its side strafes and it buffs its up and down strafes. Not its down strafe. I think it actually hurts its down strafe, but it actually boosts its up strafe, and it boosts its up strafe to actually be slightly above a Gladius.
Yeah, so you can create a steeper 90-degree deflection based on roll.
Basically, so you can get, I think max boost for Gladius, I pulled up on SP Viewer is 13, and SP Viewer doesn't show VTOL like accelerations and stuff, but you can get like barely 14.5 Gs, which is higher than the 13 Gs of a Gladius, to theoretically create that distance between the two.
Okay, so this is important. So I want us to stay on this idea here, right? Because the idea here is you're able to create deflections even slightly faster than a Gladius, which allows the Guardian to genuinely be able to stay in a fight and fight the Gladius, right? Theoretically, right? But obviously in practice it's not as easy. But I think so let me give you this example. In the previous iteration of the game, the arrow was, I think, 1223 or something like that, or 1233 or something like that. To make it simple, let's say 1200, right? And the Gladius was like 1250. So it was 50 meters per second faster than an arrow, right? Actually, that might be the opposite. I think the arrow was slightly faster than the Gladius. Anyway, the point is the margin was very tight.
Yes.
Now, it took like 8 to 10 seconds to get up to speed, right? So you'd have this whole place to play in before you hit the speed wall, which we can get into later. But the point was the differential between the two ships was very sharp. Right? Yes, there was an advantage. Yes, there was a small change. But if we remember correctly, the F8 Lightning topped out at 1300, so it could actually outrun the light fighters, right? So you have less turn rate for more tank and more speed, whereas light fighters have this brawling mentality where it's like they're going to get close and they're just going to orbit around you, and you got to make a choice whether you want to try and stay in that orbit and try to get guns on, or bring a wingman in, or leave. But there was that negotiation, right? In master modes, you don't have any of those options. There is no benefit to being in a larger platform other than DPS and tank, which can be mitigated substantially by ships that are performing at way outside your envelope. So for example, if you were to take the same ratio of, let's say, a Buccaneer and a Gladius now, the ratio works out to be flying the old flight model, topping out at 900 or 1400. And we all remember ships like the Gladiator that were topping it at 900 were absolute food for basically anything else in the cast, because topping it at 900 and fighting everything that's fighting at 12 or 13, like they're just operating at a completely different energy space than you are. So you were always at risk, like you were always being controlled no matter what you did. And I think that's the issue we're running into now with master modes, is the differential between ships is so vast because CIG has tried to force them into these little pigeonholes as to like they have to play this unique way, that they have forgotten that the nature of a fighter should be able to do all these things. Like every fighter plane in today's modern environment can fire missiles, can drop chaff, can dive, can accelerate, can afterburn, and use radar. They can do all those things. Every fighter can do all those things. Some do some things better, but in master modes it seems like some ships, this ship can use radar, this ship can't dive, this ship can only do this ship does no afterburner, and it's like, what are we doing here, guys? Like it's like playing a first-person shooter game where your class can't reload and he only has one mag, and it's just like every FPS character has to have these basic functions, and I feel like that's what we're missing.
Yeah, I think one of the key things that might be missing from that is you have the tank, you have the firepower, but one of the things that you can neutralize, which is the same thing that you can use to neutralize in Star Wars Squadrons, is really the boost aspect. Like if you remember the Y-Wing, because you have the tank, the Y-Wing and the TIE Bomber could oftentimes use their boost more efficiently than light fighters, because they could choose to take things that would cause them to take more heat without using boost and basically turn it into a boost advantage. The reason that goes into master modes is because they do have the more similar speed walls across the heavy fighters and the light fighters. One of the things I was able to do pre 4.0 or early 4.0 when they had the old G meter, which I preferred the old G meter, is I was able to really, and again, I don't really always like the idea of speed walls and everything, but I was able to do this. I was able to pretty much hug the speed walls with whatever strafes I was doing and hold the boost button. But the key is you would never ever use boost to get to SEM, and you would only use boost to sustain post SEM once you got to that additional higher SEM speed. And what that would allow you to do is basically drain the light fighters of boost. And generally, I could never have light fighters be light fighters. If they have boost and I have boost, they can outmaneuver me. But if I can out boost them, and I can pretty much, like, I drain them out of stamina, like I'm playing this Monster Hunter game, and the hunter's out of stamina, I can beat them once we're both out of stamina. If we're both out of stamina, he's stuck there in one of those range at some point, and I can just snap piece Thanos out of there. So
yeah,
that's one of the key aspects that I think might be missing.
It's super easy to mitigate that advantage, though, right? So, and again, it's like, I agree theoretically, yes, if you can use that to your advantage in master modes, but
easy to me though is again more of a quantitative issue.
Yeah, it's
right?
hard.
Like,
it's a very subjective thing.
It's hard to say like how easy is it. Is it a 3 out of 10? Is it a 7 out of 10? Is it an 8 out of 10? I think it's an issue that needs to be looked into more. But yeah.
So this is the crux of the thought experiment. If we get if we get skill completely out of the equation, right? And this, I think, what CIG needs to do is they need to stop thinking about skill. Skill is the wild card. That's the point, right? The idea here is to look at ships from an objective lens and to realize capabilities. Is the heavy fighter capable of negotiating a fight in some way with the light fighter? And I think currently that's a resounding no. Just because most people don't know how to utilize that, that's fine. That's going to come with time as people learn the game and get better. If the game were to come out live today, people would start looking more at the videos I'm making and be like, okay, well, that's what I have to do to be the Guardian. And you'd find a whole lot of people out there doing what I did to you, because once people know that that's how you do it, that's how you win against the ship, you just go ahead and do it, because it's the Arrow or the light fighter's fight to lose. If he does it right, there's no way you can beat that. It's his fight to F up, and I think that's the crux of the issue. Is it's not
just to bracket that for 1v1 context.
Correct.
At least for that, yeah.
Right. We can go to the team fight stuff later for sure, but yeah, in this context, it's the duel, right? But this is an analogy as to like where the thought space is. Like, are heavy fighters supposed to be good at dueling? Well, I come from the standpoint of every fighter in the game should have the ability to defend itself. This idea that this fighter is basically unable to defend itself in a 1v1, I think is a really detriment. It's really not healthy for the game. Like, it's just not good. Obviously, there should be some ships that are better at 1v1s. No doubt about it. I'm not saying that. But in the previous model, like I said, you could win a 1v1 in pretty much any ship against any other ship, because the margins between the ships weren't so vast, and I think that's really super important. Is the smaller, and I think this is what CIG is getting wrong, is the smaller the differences, the larger the effect. In the sense that a 5 to 10 meter per second difference in SCM speeds between the Arrow and the Gladius make the Arrow completely useless in a team fight against the Gladius. So there's a very small window, but it's massive when you actually really think about it. Whereas if you have completely different modalities, like interceptors versus fighters, you're literally playing two totally different games, And I think what we got to do is we got to play the same game, and instead the fighters have to have sharper differences between each other, and instead of having the Talon in its own little box, this ship in its own little box, and you're playing basically rock, paper, scissors times a million. Instead, all fighters in general behave relatively the same, and there are all these small differences, which does bring out that personality between all the ships. But a fighter is a fighter. A Talon, a Gladius, an Arrow, a Hornet, it's a fighter. You know what I mean? There's certain max and min capabilities that a fighter can do. Fighters shouldn't be the option to come kill Idrises. They shouldn't be the option for air to ground. They can do it, but to a limited degree. But ultimately, every fighter should be able to be able to fight in a 1v1. Every fighter should have some kind of team capability. And I think that's what we're missing with master modes.
Yeah, and I mean, two subjective things from my point of view. First off, if you have the F8C and it has an AI blade, that's gonna be that's good. There's so much that we don't have developed in the game that could completely change like how in the world a fighter should work once they have AI blades. Like the arrows promised to have AI blades at some point, which is
it has it. It's in now. You can get the TPS blade and the termite blade.
Or sorry, not the. I mean the AI remote turret blades that was promised in the Q&A.
Oh, so, like offloading aim to see, that's dumb. That's so dumb.
It's in the Q&A though, so there's all these things that I don't really know for sure. So, but from like from a subjective perspective, like for me, like if you look at like Star Wars lore and everything, like if you have like the best of the best TIE fighter versus a really good X-wing pilot, like the TIE fighter is supposed to be super maneuverable and like able to get behind the X-wing because the X-wing's more of like a heavy fighter and stuff. And a lot of times, like the X-wing pilot can do it because he is just the best ace pilot in the entire world.
Technically, it's a multi-role fighter by Incom, but okay.
It's a multi-role by Incom. But for me, I like the skill cap, the skill ceiling to be the highest with the most like high risk, high reward, smallest fighters that you just get basically one shot if you get hit once. Like the people who are choosing to run in Furies, A-Wings, and TIE Interceptors, I want them to be able to beat me if I'm in a heavy fighter because there's a risk reward factor kind of with that when they come to it. But that's just my subjective opinion. I get other people who want who want to have something that's more like, hey, here's the fighter class of ships, here's the gunboat sort of class of ships, and the other things. But for me, I'm all right. Like, it might seem weird. I'm all right if every light fighter in the game at their maximum effectiveness can 1v1 duel me and defeat me if they get to that skill level in a light fighter versus my heavy fighter. I'm all right with that. So because I also know of all the other roles and utility my heavy fighter can bring in the PU and in other circumstances. So
okay, so let's poke a hole in that theory for a second, right?
Okay.
So here's my thought. If that's true, and we live in that world where, you know, the quote unquote, like once you get to a certain skill level, you essentially graduate from heavy fighters and you move into exclusively light fighters, because the overall.
Well, you don't graduate from heavy fighters to light fighter. I think they're two different like flight style skill sets, personally. So because you need gimbals in many ways for the current heavy fighters from my perspective, because that's what I use, and that's a completely different way that you're fighting because you have to deal with slew rate and stuff, and like how do you counter slew rate with your stripes and stuff. But so I'm not sure about that, but I will say that like if you get to a certain extent of light fighter, you can graduate from losing to heavy fighters to just beating out all of them in 1v1s.
So from my standpoint, assuming, like, obviously the game's always in flux, right? But there has been a constant, this is what I was saying before, to circle back to the acceleration thing, there has been a constant in that even in the previous iteration of the game, the margin between heavy fighters and lights was tighter. So a really good Hurricane pilot, for example, is a really big problem, or was a really big problem for light fighters. I would fight Hurricanes in the Persistent Universe solo, and they would be the toughest fights. Like, they would be genuinely my toughest fights. But I got them. But it was just like only so many people in the world were able to genuinely be able to take on a heavy fighter in a 1v1 with turret gunner. Yeah. Like, it just was.
Well, I mean, with the turret gunner though, at that point, I'm like, 2 Guardians versus 2 Gladiuses is a very, very different combat.
Yes.
Because then there's triangulation and fire where you can shoot someone who's on the tail of another. So it's like, would I rather have a Hurricane or would I rather have 2 Guardians? It's
right, and we can get into the multi-crew aspect of stuff too, which makes my heart hurt. But
Starfarer has amazing multi-crew, by the way, very underrated. So
the idea I'm kind of getting to is there should be trade-offs. I agree. The guy that takes the Fury is trading, well, a quantum drive and all these other things, you know, and the fact that he can just get hit by basically anything and he's toast, right? For being an angry walnut, you know, being this tiny little thing that is just super hard to hit and just annoying, and especially in groups, like in a pack, you could put hundreds of Furies on an Idris. I mean, you could fill an entire server deploying Furies from an Idris.
That's crazy.
You know, I'm a huge fan of the Archimedes because I think the Archimedes in a team environment is the best ship in the game. Like, there's literally nothing in the game that can beat a squadron of Archimedes except for other Archimedes.
Well, interceptors can just choose not to lose. So it's like if they don't want to take a fight, they're at a disadvantage. They just choose not to lose. That's such a strong.
But this is what I'm saying is they can choose not to lose because of what?
Because of their top speeds. So.
And
you would say accelerations, and I would agree with that for sure, because they can get out of the circumstances. That's why I think Scorpius is so strong. So, but
Scorpius is very strong. Yeah.
It's a interceptor that you can make mistakes in and not just instantly get one tapped. So
yeah, it's tough. Like, and I always tell people, like, what's the best heavy fighter? I'm like, Scorpius. Like, do it with a gunner. Like, don't do it by yourself. Do it with a gunner. But a Scorpius with a gunner is a really difficult platform to kill. And I think for the majority of people out there in the universe, like, a Scorpius will just absolutely face roll a lot of people. And I'm okay. I'm okay with the majority of people experiencing that sin. But I'm not talking about the majority. I'm always talking at it from... You need to balance at the highest level, not the mid tier.
But for me, like, if I'm escorting like a whole C or something, which is a super slow target, and I want to defend that person just long enough for him to get like point A to point B or something like that, for me, a lot of times I want something that's more of a stationary platform that has the firepower to pretty much what I call swat the fly, and just like fight them, swat the fly, fight them, swat the fly.
That's a losing strategy, and the reason for that is you probably, if you're tackled, like, that's it. The fight's on, right?
Well, think about like ancient Europe. Well, castles are, from that perspective, losing strategies. The castle is going to be laid siege to, and eventually it's going to lose. But the purpose of the castle isn't to beat the sieging armory; it's to pretty much wait there long enough to get reinforcements. So.
Right, but yeah, but we're living in a world with master modes where it's castles versus artillery 155 shells. Like, we kill the castle so quickly that, like, there is no getting reinforcements, because by the time the message gets sent out, the carrier pigeon's dead and the half the freaking city's gone. So
well, maybe, but now Idrises have like 3 billion shield HP, and like whole seas have crazy shield HP. It takes forever to kill. Like an army of Corsairs, oh my goodness, I would never want to deal with an army of Corsairs. So.
Yeah, I mean, I've always thought to myself, like, what would a porcupine fleet look like? And the sense is, you get a whole bunch of ships that are like, Corsairs. You get like 6 or 7 Corsairs just tightly packed in a group, and they're just basically sitting and spinning. Like, they're doing essentially like a Roman shield wall, where they don't strafe at all. They just stand still and all face out in different directions, and they just move as one unit, and they just return fire with weapons. But I think with the way that, again, this all comes down to the gunnery system too. Like, if I can hit you from 2,500 meters away, like, why would I ever close distance to shoot at you? You know, I've been begging.
The only reason would be is if there's a way for you to get additional damage when you're up close. So, like, for example, if you're fighting a Corsair at like 2,500 meters and they're able to rotate shield faces, and their shield regen outpaces your possible DPS at that range while the VTOL barrel roll, that then becomes an issue. Like, I remember I was fighting a really well-known pirate organization who was ganking a Solo Polaris at Grimhex, who was trying to do a cargo mission of some sorts and stuff, and they're bombing them with Eclipses. They have all their fighters. They have fully recruited Redeemers. They have interceptors, and I'm like, if I'm going to go in this 1vx encounter, I'm going to take something heavy, and I'm going to take a Corsair. If I don't have a Corsair, I'm bringing a Guardian. So it's like, if you're taking 1vx, you're taking a losing battle. If I'm taking a losing battle, I want to do something that takes down as many people down with me as possible, and usually it's one of those cases, because most of the time it's like one person can stay in my slot, but once one person's in my slot, it's like they're going to crash into each other if they try to put someone else there, if I put enough pressure in my rotations. So,
So, do you feel like philosophically the idea of what heavy fighters are at the moment are going in the right direction, or do you feel like there needs to be, because for me, I personally feel like there needs to be a fundamental shift in the way that CIG is visualizing the concept of heavy fighters? But what do you like? What's your perspective?
When I look at squadron battles and stuff, which I do a lot of, and I perform really well, but it's also not like I'm not doing these like competitive battles and stuff. It's just quick play matches and stuff, which I think is more representative, like the whole community as a whole, and just people who are randomly playing together. It's more of a random sample. The heavy fighters, from my perspective, are more able to play in a team setting and take on XV1 encounters, and when I do that, it makes my team have better, they take on better 1vx encounters where they can fight multiple opponents at the same time, in which they'll lose, but they still do better at it than a lot of other enemies. And what that does is it creates opportunities for other people on your team to XV1 individuals. And that's like where I look at the Interceptor. Why is the Interceptor so good? It's like, they can always make it an XV1 encounter because they can just all run away together and then go pick off the lone person. But what if you're fighting a really coordinated group who never creates that lone person? I think that's where you have the heavy fighter. It goes in like a bowling ball, and all of a sudden they have X number of their people attacking that one, and they split off a smaller portion of your group, and then you can hammer and anvil them between the heavy fighter who really knows how to play their heavy fighter and the interceptors who take on that XV1 really efficiently.
So that may work with larger multi-crew ships, size 3 and above, because the concept that you're explaining, I have never been able, I've just never seen it work. Like, it's better to have, and this is what I've been noticing, is because we did a lot of internal testing about this too. We fought other squadrons, like we really put our heads down and went to work researching this stuff, and that's why I created the tier list I did, because I always came at it from the side of like, okay, what is the best ship? What's the best bang for your buck, right? Like if skill wasn't an issue and training was done correctly and chips were down, like what's that ship, you know? And to me, it's like a squadron of M50s is terrifying. Like it's absolutely terrifying.
This is an important point of like of context and stuff also, because if there's a tier list of, hey, I'm going to solo queue and I have to carry my team from a 2,000 point deficit versus I'm going to go play with a highly coordinated group of individuals, or at least people who have a degree of efficiency in the game versus another crew and they have coherency together. If I'm solo queuing, I have no coherency with my team. I have to like create the coherency out of nothing, and I'm going to know that I'm going to be XV1 and probably fighting an outskilled team. So I kind of do need to pull something out of nowhere that maybe isn't expected, like in a Corsair, and I've had repeated success with that. And it's kind of like in Star Wars Squadrons. When whoever plays Star Wars Squadrons and stuff, there is this aspect that eventually it turned into being called seal clubbing, which probably shouldn't be done. It is kind of bad, but it's a score race at the end of the day in a squadron battle circumstance of how efficiently can you kill the people who aren't as good. And more guns allows you to kill the not as good players more efficiently, and larger ships are able to do that. So if you're able to get rid of a certain group of individuals on the other team, and you are able to like sort of fly, zone the fly, so to say. Like if you're playing Star Wars Squadrons, we would go through and look at every single person's KD and win rate to identify this guy's an ace pilot. We don't really want to engage him. We just want to throw one person at him and keep him engaged while we do more aggressive plays on the rest of the team. That's sort of what I would do with like heavy fighters and stuff, is take the people who have a tons of firepower to efficiently take out the people who are going to foolishly take the nose-to-nose fights with those, and then use your more elegant like fencers and duelers to take out the other individuals. So that way you're not stuck still with the others. But
yeah, and you're absolutely correct. And this is why I have been begging CIG, after the last 6 years, give us an elimination team like round base mode, because the data sets they're getting from Arena Commander are super skewed. You know, we're talking points per minute, we're talking big guns, like let's farm rookies, and you're not going to get even in the you're not going to get into the ballpark of where ships should sit, because when you go into the persistent universe, it is an elimination. There is no response. It takes a while to get back. You know,
I think the reason for that is they're trying to balance for not just having everyone spawn these giant ships, because you get more points if you kill the giant ships. So if it goes into an elimination system, then you just have people buying the biggest ship they can and sitting in whales
that's right. So that's simple. You just make it size 1 and 2 ships only. Elimination size 1 and 2. Boom. Easy.
Yeah, but I like my Corsair, so that,
right. Well, then I mean, then just bring it into the regular Arena Commander Squadron Battle mode, right? But I think the fighters in general need to, like, we need to have them designed, and I think this is the flaw that CIG is getting into, is they're making all these changes and they're looking at all these numbers, but their numbers are wrong, right? Yeah. Because they're getting the wrong numbers and they're not setting themselves up for success. Because it just like it's wrong from what aspect is. Like it's wrong to maybe what they're trying to look for in the persistent universe, and I think that's part of the reason that there's probably been less of a focus on AC. Is I don't know how much they're really focusing on AC data compared to how much more they're probably focusing on PU data nowadays with their current balancing efforts and perhaps
stuff. So,
perhaps. But, you know, I mean, there are. I mean, who knows what CIG does? And sometimes they do, you know, they look into their crystal ball and who knows what's going on in their minds, right? But I think ultimately, I mean, to circle back around, like, you know, the heavy fighters, I personally think I want to see them reconcepted as high energy. So I would rather see heavy fighters behave like interceptors, and interceptors that are currently interceptors. Like, I think this concept of what's a fighter and what's an interceptor is totally wrong. I think what we should have is something that's much more a combination of both interceptor and light fighter, and all ships should be those variations, and the differences between ships should be a lot tighter, so that the skill expression of the pilot, like themselves, is the defining factor in the fight, mixed with the choice, the setup. Like, I think the idea of, well, the Talon is really effective against this ship, or the Talon really does well against this ship, or the Gladius does really well against the Hornet, but the Hornet does really well against the Santok Yai, I think is a really terrifying way to visualize the game, because this game isn't EVE Online 2.0. You can't train dogfighting to level 5. Like, this isn't that style of game. There is no levels. There is no World of Warcraft, let's get to level 40 before we start doing PvP. You, as the physical human being, your knowledge, your physical skill set in applying effective movements to a ship is the level of your character. And when you segregate that, when you take away the skill expression of the pilot and offload it to, well, this ship beats that ship because it's more rock, paper, scissors, well, I think what you've ended up doing is you've essentially cut a lot of the depth of the game out and replaced it with, I think, a very cheap, I think, kind of cheesy depth.
Yeah, and I mean, I think part of it is maybe rock, paper, scissors in a 1v1, but when I look at it more like a strategic level, it's like, hey, you might have your vanguards, and then you have like your specialist seals and stuff, and it's like, yeah, these guys who are, they're really good at working in these like large chaff environments where there's lots and lots of ads, and then you have these other ones
chaff, don't even get me
more
started.
Specialized. Yeah.
Such a terrible mechanic.
Yeah, I miss when chaff didn't break radar, and it was just for a different missile type, which that's another thing. It's like there's this whole idea of like missile rework will eventually come in. A lot of the heavy fighters are great missile carriers, and they have tons of things.
I'm
like
getting PTSD from missiles.
You go into Star Wars Squadron, and it's like, was the TIE bomber? First off, I feel like I'd take off any of the fighters with if I had the reinforced hull, and I do like the aspect of boost where it's like it's singular momentum, and that's one thing that I kind of would like in the forward direction potentially with heavy fighters to explore. It would be cool to see more ships maybe kind of like that, but I don't know if I would say I want them like interceptors in the part that. So I love the identity of heavy fighters being able to shrug off hits and stuff, like the really tanky Y-wings taking on all these hits and stuff, and I don't want that to be compromised even if they are fighters, but that's my subjective take. At the end of the day, I love that identity of those ships, but as they incorporate all these utility things such as missiles, such as having AI turret blades on top of the F-8C that just shoots for you automatically, you have E-warfare on the Sentinel. I'm kind of okay, because all the light fighters, they don't really have a lot of area growth with all this extra capacity, and there's all these mechanics that are unreleased that could make heavy fighters, like they have so many more like options for utility add-ons, that I'm okay with them being in a slightly worse position when all these sort of like items could be thrown in that turn them into like these mages that are just super strong. So
yeah, I get worried because I want the game to be flight centric focused instead of kind of this 3D like
MMO Zerg where everyone runs EMPs, and then they have this like massive Guild Wars 2 fireball of EMP that fries these fighters who are like the best fighters in the game.
Yeah, because I have this concept of dogfights in the future looking like something you'd see at EVE Online, where one guy is the anchor, and then all you see is like 20 hurricanes just lined up one after the other behind each other, not making any maneuvers at all, and they're literally saying, okay, target this guy, and then all the turret gunners swing to that guy, okay, next guy, target this guy, next guy, and it's just like F1, 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 next until everyone's dead. And there was absolutely no dogfighting, no chasing, no turning, no dogfighting. Like, it was just a school of fish moving into range, and then there's just this volume of fire, and just one at a time they're taking them out, because if any Gladius ball were to get close to that group of hurricanes, they would just put out so much fire, you know?
that's where so much of the aspect of the identity of Star Citizen that's different than like Star Wars Squadrons is this aspect of class v class ship mechanics versus like, because you're incorporating turrets and eventually multi-crew and everything, that I'm very careful to like say that we need to micro balance the fighter class and stuff, when this macro level of what if we have these larger ships that have all these turrets on it, how do they come into the picture, to get that sort of macro balance before you really hone in onto the details and stuff, which for me, again, is this issue of like more almost like exploratory research into all these different instances and contexts of this fighter versus this fighter versus this large ship. How should that feel, and getting that macro level down before you really going into these really more kind of quantitative issues of saying, well, how easy of a fight is this versus this ship? More so because I think that has a developed community. There's a community who they will figure that out for us eventually, if it's put onto the table and is like made a common state. But there's a lack of a community that's really, I think, passionately looking at all those other edge cases. So, but I mean, which really I think makes Star Citizen and not just another Star Wars Squadrons. So,
yeah, I would agree. There is a depth to it for sure that we're all still trying to figure out, and I would be remiss or highly self-inflated to say that we've got it all figured out and this is the absolute way it is and blah blah blah, right? I have a good idea of where the game's at right now. I feel like I have a strong sense of what we currently have, because I always come at it from the side of, I understand that later on we're going to get all these different things and, you know, there's going to be different mechanics implemented. That's great. When it's in the game, then I will take a look at it and see how it affects the experience, right? But I always come at it from the lens of, this is what we have now, this is what's happening right now, this is where ships are, and you know, I just get frustrated because I want to see Star Citizen improve, and I think a lot of times, sometimes they make these changes in a bit of a vacuum, I think, you know, and I would just like to see them improve the product, and instead of taking lots of different side steps and not really getting anywhere, you know, because if you remember way back in the day, you know, being around since the very beginning of this game and being a top pilot for basically every single patch for the last 10 years, I've experienced all these different mechanics, all these different individuals, from John Pritchett to Calix to, you know, to all that, Brandon, to everybody.
Yep.
Now with Yogi, and sometimes I feel like we're treading ground we've already been on. Like, we tried Afterburner, it didn't feel good. We actually
2.0 is Master Modes. I remember it's like Master Modes is this new thing, and I'm like, this isn't new. We've been here. It was 10 years ago.
You know, so, and like I remember 2.6. You know, and I remember face tanking and trading all day, and it's just, you know, I think there's this thing that happens where these ideas, they get retreaded because either CIG doesn't know their own history, or again, it's just like, I mean, I've spoken to certain individuals and I've said like, yeah, we did this, and they're like, oh wow, I didn't even know that. And it's like, you should know this, like, in my opinion, you know, and you should know the results of what they did and why it didn't work, and, you know, what felt good and what didn't. Because I remember when Calix was fiddling around with the flight model, he tried an asymmetrical speed zone. He gave us essentially the Master Mode speed cone, and people hated it. Like, they really hated it. But he also gave us like a really tight, like basically an interceptor cone, and people didn't like that at all. So maybe the cone size was just not feeling good, right? But I mean, there's so many things they can do. I'm hopeful for the future. And we're pretty much coming up on time here. We've been talking for about an hour and a half, which is great. You know, I absolutely love these conversations. They're super technical. They get into the weeds on stuff. So I think there's going to be some folks out there that maybe don't understand some of the references we put up, and that's okay. This conversation was not for the layman. This was for the enthusiast. This conversation between me and you was for the person who maybe already has some knowledge and is really interested in different perspectives. You know, not to say that people can't follow along. It's just, I really enjoy these technical conversations. I feel like I'm sitting down with a PhD of 6DOF games, and we're really going through it and trying to figure out if our theories of stuff are correct, you know? So to close it off, I want to know where people can find you, you know, and also what what do you feel like, as someone coming into Star Citizen who wants to get involved or get more information about PvP, what is the process that you would give them, and what is the mindset and attitude that you would say is the most successful in this space?
I think a lot of people get bogged down into all the theory crafting, what's going to be, and all that sort of stuff, and it can be maddening to go through all that. There's so many spaces to talk about with that. And for me, it's a meme. It's been beat as a horse has been beaten to death. But I think in the Mary Kondo quote, "Get rid of everything else. Do what sparks joy. Do what you like right now in the game. Like if you're like between two ships, you can always get ships and melt them. Do what you find is fun in the game right now. Like, don't play PvP because you think you'll like it tomorrow. Find some way to do PvP you like today. If you like cargo hauling today, do that right now today. Don't get stuck in all the theory crafting and stuff. Let that be a side entertainment thing that you like. Don't let it dictate your enjoyment of Star Citizen and everything. For me, that's really what I find is in community and stuff. I think playing community with Star Citizen and stuff is what sparks joy for me. In the communities I've played with for Star Citizen is Fleet of the Faithful Knights. It's a very lawful centric org. If you're playing D&D, it's a lawful good org. If that's your kind of thing, they don't just do PvP, though they are a military organization. I'm not a formal leader in that organization, so I can't tell you if you'll make it in or if you won't make it in, but I've loved being able to fly with them. They give me great opportunities to develop with some of the best pilots and have just be a part of their awesome community. Additionally, if you want to be part of our community, which I do run, I can just get you in there. Join Adventure Club. If you go to any of my videos, I should have a link to Adventure Club. And we do variety gaming of all things. Some of us do Star Citizen. Some of the guys in there are pirates. I will hunt them down in the PU if I find them, even though they're on the same server. But those are great avenues. And if you're going through the video games and stuff, I mean, like, people are always like, you do something better with your life. I'm like, if video gaming sparks joy and you build community with it and stuff, I'm like, dude, do that. If you have community with it, do that. Build that community, because I think that's one of the most underdeveloped skills and just qualities to have in your life. You have a lot of people who they have great talent, they have great abilities, but having people who lead and develop community is something that's really long lasting, and that's really honestly I think what matters at the end of the day for a lot of gaming spheres. So. Mm-hmm. Alrighty. And also, just thank you for giving me this opportunity to talk to you and stuff, Adventure. It's awesome. So I remember seeing some of your really old videos, your old Cuddy videos on YouTube.
Oh yeah,
and a lot of my gameplay. So it's a little surreal to be able to talk to you. So you just giving the opportunity to do that is super cool of you. So.
Yeah, I love these conversations, man. I'm sure this will be first of many conversations together. I love getting into weeds about this stuff. I love what you're doing with your channel. I really think this stuff is cool. It's really highly technical. It is very experimental. It's looking at stuff from a totally different perspective and lens, which I really appreciate. And I think there's a lot of folks out there that would probably appreciate it too. And if they are students of combat, like I am, and a lot of guys here in AVS are, you know, it's always something. You know, it's always good to be educated, to learn, to understand what you're dealing with.
I originally did the 101 certification course with AVS ages ago. So I have a tag. So if you want to, AVS has an amazing intro level pilot program. If you haven't done anything with PvP ever, they have a great system of individuals who are willing to help you and stuff. So I mean, they did for me years ago, and now I can do PvP at a somewhat competitive level, which is awesome. So. And
I gotta say, I got a 9800 X3D. And holy smokes, holy smokes, did it jack my frames. I went from 35 frames to like 180 or something ridiculous. Like it's a totally.
So that's how you killed me.
Yeah, I paid to win. I paid to win. All right, Alkaline, I had an absolute blast. Thank you so much. You know, for everyone who's watching the podcast, be sure to check them out. Adventure Club and FFK.
Adventure Club, so
yes,
Fleet of the Faithful Knights.
Yeah,
so.
Right. It'll be linked in the description for the video here for you guys. And thanks for watching. Hope you guys enjoyed it. And I'll see you guys all up for the next one. Bye for next time.